First of all, a background. Some of you know I grew up in Cambridge. I grew up among Greek immigrants in a tenement in Cambridge. So by 9 years old, we were playing soccer on the street, not football. And people were saying, I serve Mass. Ed, do you serve Mass? And then talking about the Divine Liturgy, which is what they call Mass. And I discovered as a 9-year-old, to my parents' absolute consternation, because most Catholics don't know that there are 22 other churches, even in communion with us, let alone the ones not in communion with us, another 22. I found, by the time I was 10 years old, I found the Catholic faith in an entirely different expression. And it blew my mind. Okay? I actually started attending the Russian mission in South Boston, where it was a Russian Eastern Church in communion with us. And frankly, if they didn't use Old Slavonic, I probably would have ended up being one of their priests. But I couldn't master the Old Slavonic at all. Had a much better time with Greek, which helped me in the seminary when we got to translating the scripture, which is all in Greek. So I take the perspective that there are many sides to this diamond that is Catholic Christianity. And that sometimes if you look at more than one side, you get a more interesting perspective of the reality. So last week we spoke, or 2 weeks ago, we spoke about a little bit about the Holy Sepulchre and our expression of Holy Week. So I want to encourage you, if you haven't been, to attempt to go to the 3 services. Holy Thursday night, Good Friday afternoon or evening, and Holy Saturday night. I know Holy Saturday night always has the heritage of being long. And I always say, look, first of all, it's the first Mass of Easter, so you don't have to get up in the morning. Secondly, it's the shortest all-night vigil that the Roman Catholic Church has. Where do you think sunrise services came from? Sunrise services came from, it ended with the sun coming up and morning praise being sung. Started in the dark with the Easter candle, right? And ended up, in fact, if you listen to the song at the Easter candle, it says, "May the rising dawn meet this light." Okay, so I want you to really celebrate the dying and rising of Jesus Christ as the promise of your own dying and rising, not just when Jesus comes again and raises the dead, but rising even now. The scriptures last weekend, Lazarus Sunday. Scripture said, I will open your graves. It didn't say 1,000 years from now, or much later I will open your graves. It just said, I will open your graves, and I am the Lord, and I will do it. And Ezekiel was talking about now. That's how I want you to celebrate Holy Week. So I don't want you to go to this Eastern Holy Week unless you're already doing ours. But I want to talk about the Eastern one a little bit in order to, because from two different perspectives, you sometimes see things better. When I was a kid, I saw all the sacraments in the tradition of Constantinople, not in the tradition of Rome. And I found them to be remarkably the same in a very different way. And it's intriguing to see it. So, I told you 2 weeks ago that the original Jewish way of celebrating the dying and rising of Jesus Christ for Jewish believers, so the apostles, when they first went off to bring the message everywhere, the big explosion of going out everywhere, all over the empire to spread the word. The original celebration was a one-day celebration, the first day of Passover, whatever day of the week it was. So Easter wasn't even a Sunday. It was the 14th of April every year. But when the church became really legal, and Constantine allowed the church to come above ground for good, made it legal first and then privilege second. What ended up happening was his mother went to Jerusalem, uncovered the sites, and you start having it being more of an historical experience. So you start having Palm Sunday in Jerusalem, where it happened, and you can trace it. And then you start having Holy Thursday, and people go looking for the upper room where the Last Supper was. And they knew, as I showed you, where the Calvary and the empty tomb was, because the Emperor Hadrian covered it over, sunk it in 50 feet of concrete in order to bury it, and saved it for us. Okay? God works in funny ways, you know? And that's been proven, if you weren't here last time we did this, that's been proven by no less a neutral source as National Geographic, who filmed the whole thing. There's an hour film that proves that the original site is the correct site for Calvary and the empty tomb. Okay, so we think of Holy Thursday as preeminently the Eucharist and maybe secondarily the washing of feet. In the Eastern Church, and when I say the Eastern Church, I generally mean the Rite of Constantinople. You know where that is? That's Istanbul. Because it's until 40 years before Columbus, the Roman Empire existed in Constantinople. And it was called the city. It was so famous, it was called the city. So it was referred to in Greek as into the city, Eistin Poli, which Arabs can't say, because they can't say peas. All right? They say bees instead of peas. So Paul is Boulos. So it becomes Eistin Poli, becomes Istanbul. Istanbul. All right? Into the city. All right? So the Eastern Church celebrates from the ungodly experience. Now, I had a Greek Orthodox priest who I grew up with who will remain unnamed, but he said to me, don't say this anywhere until I'm dead, but he's still very much alive. I spent last week with him and his wife in New York. He said, I called him and said, Christ is risen. And the response is, truly risen. And he said, truly risen, Ed, but the priest is half dead. All right? And the reason is, First Communion is upstairs.
No,
But
they're with me.
if you're with me,
You're with
this is good. Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome.
So, because they have 14 services, starting on Palm Sunday night. And they have Palm Sunday like we do in the procession and all. First 3 nights, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, are what they call bridegroom services. Behold, the bridegroom is coming, the end of time, Christ coming in majesty. We don't use the theme of the bridegroom a lot. But I want to show you a picture of the bridegroom. It's not what you think. Those 3 nights, the issue is, behold, the bridegroom is coming in majesty. Are you ready? Do you have a wedding garment? Or are you liable to be thrown out of the banquet because you don't have a wedding garment? This is the bridegroom. All right? Not the picture of the bridegroom. But this is the bridegroom. I'll be right back there, Robert. Okay? Christ in torment. Because the image is this, he weds his church in his death and resurrection. And this is the length he goes to in order to wed us to himself. Okay? So I said to Michael Curran one day, I said, I think we describe Holy Week like what's happening. And the Eastern Church describes it as who's doing it. More. All right. So Holy Thursday morning, all day till about noon-ish, Mass would be celebrated in the morning, the Divine Liturgy, which is, again, very much like us. You'd recognize the Holy Holy and a lot of things during it, but it would be very different, too. But the service in the evening, we're going to be doing anticipation. So we're doing a service on a Thursday evening, which is an anticipation of Friday. And it's vigils or matins. And it's the service of the Passion. This is a decent picture of what might be called the 12 Gospels. 12 Gospels are read in this service. Father Anthony, being a former Protestant minister, he was an evangelical Christian before he became an Orthodox priest. He always comes out and washes feet. Usually washes the feet of some of his converts for that year. Without any service or anything, just comes out and they usually sit in front and he washes their feet. And then there is the service of the 12 Gospels. The Eastern Church only reads the Passion once on Holy Thursday night. And they split it up into 12 Gospels. They use an account that comes from what I think is about the 4th century it is an amalgamation of all the Gospels about the Passion. So you know how we read, one year we read on Sunday, Palm Sunday, we read Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We always read John on Friday. The way they do it is they put all 4 Gospels of the Passion together and read it once. And this might be a decent picture of the various pieces of it. And I want to point to this one, because the first Gospel they read is the discourse at the Last Supper, before Jesus even leaves the Last Supper room to go to Gethsemane. The advantage of that is that he gives a perspective to the rest of the Passion. So it's different than we do, but it provides a deepening perspective. Okay? So each Gospel, the first one is lengthy. This service is probably the longest service they have. I wouldn't advise it for those who have mobility problems. First of all, in the church we would go to, because I want to take some people, tell you about that at the end. But in the church we would go to, you have to go up a flight of stairs to get to the church. It's on the 2nd floor. No elevator that I know of. And I've been there a lot, but I've never seen an elevator of any kind. So the Passion story is broken up from the Last Supper discourse to Jesus on the cross, right up to the point where what I'd call the 12th station, right before he dies. It goes through all of it with all 12 Gospels. And in between the 12 Gospels, there are antiphons and prayers, and then the reading of the next Gospel. It's usually a deacon will do one, a priest will do the next one, a deacon will do one, a priest will do the next one, that kind of thing. At the 8th Gospel is the procession with the cross. That's the Gospel where Jesus is condemned and handed the cross. And these people know how something we have lost a little bit, and we didn't lose it in 1970. We lost it way before that, especially in America. We don't pray so much with our bodies. Okay? The old Latin for the Roman rite coming to the cross on Good Friday is creeping to the cross of Christ. And the rite still says, everyone take off your shoes. In America, that's kind of weird. All right? But nonetheless, that's what the book says. Okay? I've never seen even priests do it, let alone anybody else doing the liturgy. I've never seen the celebrant do it. So the cross comes out. And I'll tell you from memory just, now, for us, behold the wood of the cross, on which hung the Savior of the world. Sung 3 times, right? And it's the 3-time thing is a little bit Trinitarian, but it's also, you can't take it in once, so you need it poured over you 3 times. All right? And that's the way of ritual. All right? So half the things that we took out that were 3 times, we're putting back at this point, because you needed to be able to sit in it. I can remember Maureen's mother going down to there with me, Trace McCauley, going down to St. Mary's Church. And it was funny, I looked over at her one point and I had this reaction of her being a sponge, just kind of soaking it up. By the way, this church is Arabic background. So the haunting hymn with the cross is done first once in Arabic. And then everything is done in English. But sometimes for a major thing like the procession with the cross, they revert to doing the Arabic once. The Greek church down the street is very beautiful, and it's where I spent a lot of my time as a kid. My father used to refer to it as my other church. But if we go there, it's going to be totally in Greek. And I've been around it enough that I can manage it, but I wouldn't, you'd go right over your head. You know, the whole thing would go right over your head because you haven't experienced it. So, the procession with the cross. Today, very telling, you hear that throughout our Holy Week. Today, he is hung upon a cross. So it's not, granted it was an historical fact. Back in April of the year, I don't know, they fight about whether it was the year 30 or the year 33, whatever it was. But again, it's about our death and resurrection. So the hymn says, today, he is hung upon a cross, who hung the stars in the sky. Today he is beaten and spit upon, who is the bridegroom of the church. Today he is scourged and crowned with thorns, who is the King of all. Meanwhile, everybody is on hands and knees on the floor. No kneelers here. There's chairs and seats, which the old churches don't have. But there's chairs and seats, but no kneelers. And everybody is literally on the floor. In almost what you might call, the way you see Islam do a prostration, all right? When you see, that's how it is. My friend George, who is the Greek priest I spent time with last week, he's in Pittsburgh, and he will always say to me sometimes, please tell my mother 2 or 3 prostrations before the tomb of Christ is enough. She's 97. And I said, you know what she's going to say if I say that? He says, she's going to say, my son, the Greek priest, should know better. And you shouldn't be repeating what he tells you either. All right? Because she gets up and down faster than I do. And her comment is, look, we withstood Mussolini, then Hitler, then the communist revolution, and then we escaped to the United States. For God's sakes, I'm fine. Okay? Get through all of that. I'll make it. Thank you. But it's very beautiful and it's haunting. This is the Greek cathedral. Okay? Now, I know they have an icon screen, which is if you saw the wedding or the wedding of one of the princes in England, or you saw the coronation of King Charles. You saw an English cathedral that used to be ours, that is now Anglican, Episcopal, that has what they call a rood screen, just as high as the icon screen. It's an altar rail gone wild. All right? In the Western tradition, it was called a rood screen. You know what a rood is? It's a cross. So on the top of in the Western church, on the top, in fact, you saw it at King Charles's coronation, there was a crucifix on the top of the screen. Screen's 11 feet high. And John and Mary on each side. Okay? And it's the deacon's job to come out from behind the screen and unite the people outside and the priest inside. And it actually happens. If you watch their liturgy, the screen can kind of disappear. Okay? But it's there as an image of the saints worshiping with us. But you see, the Greeks tend to be very effusive with flowers and all. There's no darkness about their Holy Week. So there's all kinds of flowers, and there's usually about, at St. Helens in Cambridge, there would usually be about 6 wreaths on the cross. All right? But the cross comes out and is wreathed, comes out from the side. It's actually the altar cross behind the altar. Comes out this way and is put up. And then the people come forward to it and venerate it. Prostrating 3 or 4 times on the way, and then kissing the feet of Christ, and then prostrating back 3 or 4 times again, back to their seat. It's a workout. Catholics are always invited to venerate the cross. We do not take communion in Orthodox churches. They believe it is the real presence. We believe it is the real presence, but we're not in communion, so we don't take communion. But this is not Mass anyway. This is a scripture service with the Gospels being read. That's Thursday. Okay, so here's Thursday. This is called, this service is usually a kid's service. He's got a couple of kids helping. And it is called the unveiling. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I used to take I have an honorary Greek Orthodox godson, because I wasn't his godfather at his baptism and confirmation and Eucharist, which they do all at once, as an infant. But his Greek godfather died in a motorcycle accident 6 months after he was born. And his father, who I grew up with, said, I want you to be his godfather. So I became Nick's godfather. And I used to take him to this 3 o'clock service in the afternoon on Good Friday, which is a kid's service. You see the cross? And the Lord's still on it. This service reads what you might call the 13th Gospel. The taking down of Jesus. Jesus dies, and the taking down of Jesus from the cross. And this is what you see with the kids helping the cross, with no body on it, being taken off the cross and being processed around the church. And look at the far one over there. That's the tomb. The rite of the Church of Malone has a funeral service for the Lord on Good Friday. England used to prior to the Reformation. So in English churches, you can still find a sepulchre. That's not, in Episcopal churches, you can still find in England a sepulchre in the church that's not used anymore. So this would be Thursday, Friday afternoon, the taking down of Jesus from the cross and processing his body around the church, and then putting, they take this shroud in and place it on the altar table, and in here, show you what's in there in a minute. Why don't we go to the next slide, Jim? This is the inside, all right? So here's the bier, what they call the epitaphium, the tomb. And here's the inside. Joseph of Arimathea and all laying out Jesus on in the tomb. Now, their girls and boys have no first communion, because if you go to an Orthodox church, the kids receive first communion at baptism. The priest takes precious blood on his thumb and puts it in their mouth, or drips some into their mouth after he confirms them. So what they do in the United States, I don't know if they do it everywhere, but in the United States, the Greeks at least, their girls dress up in white, like it was First Communion Day, and parade around the tomb, being the myrrh-bearing women, sprinkling flowers on the tomb. So almost all the girls will do that at one point when they're maybe 4th, 5th, 6th grade. And now in Cambridge, one church is up by the town hall, and the other church is in the middle of Central Square. They take the two tombs and come out and meet in the center of Central Square, stop traffic, to praise the death of Christ in Arabic, Greek, and English, and then go back to their church. It's a great personal witness. I find it interesting that in the Eastern Church, because there was at one point a vernacular, so the liturgy was understood by the people, and then it became an old version of the language. It became an old version of the language. The devotions are all in the morning prayer, evening prayer, and vigils, not separate devotions like we have. All right? So that we used to do a liturgy of the word for kids on Good Friday afternoon. And I asked Arthur Flynn if we could do that, because I thought the Holy Week services were a little much for little kids. And Arthur Flynn's comment was, you can do it, but don't do what we're going to do upstairs. Don't have them venerate the cross downstairs, because we're going to do that upstairs. Don't have them do the ancient prayers downstairs, because we're going to do it upstairs. So I took a copy of the shroud and did a procession with it downstairs, just to do something a little different. And of course, one of the things, and of course the poetry that the Eastern Church has retained at the time of Trent, because of all the trouble with the Protestant Reformation, the Pope at the time removed most of the poetry from the Roman Catholic liturgy. We have a couple of things left. We have the Stabat Mater, at the cross for station keeping that we use on Holy Thursday. We have one on Easter Sunday that nobody uses. We have one on Corpus Christi that nobody uses. It'll be interesting to see if it gets used this year. The Easter Sunday one. They call them the sequence. All right, there used to be 235 or 6 of them. And they kept 4. All right? But let me give you an example of the kinds of poetry that the Eastern Church uses. Now this is while the Psalms are being sung at the tomb. Today, Hades, hell itself, cried out, groaning, "Would that I had not received him. He was born of Mary, but he came to me because he had died and broke my power. He shattered the gates of brass, and as God, he has lifted up the souls which before I held in death. Glory to your cross, O Lord." Yes, today, Hades cried out, groaning, "My authority has been destroyed. I received a mortal as one among many mortals, but this one I had no power over. I perish instead of him. From eternity I held the dead, but behold, he has raised up all the dead. Glory to you, O Lord, in your resurrection. My power has been trampled upon. The true shepherd has been crucified, and he has raised up Adam. I am deprived of those over whom I rule, and all those whom I swallowed up in my strength, I have now given up. He who was crucified has entered the tombs, and the power of death no longer exists. Glory, O Lord, to your cross and resurrection." All right? And so it's a teaching statement, and it comes across, the best I can figure out, is that it comes across to the people sitting there like, well, have you ever gone to see a Shakespearean play? And the language, it's English, but it's not quite our English, it's Old English. Or if you were subjected, I'm sure we all were, subjected to reading Beowulf, which was the most boring thing I ever did. Okay? But it too was in even older English. It comes across like that to a lot of the Greek people today. Their language is much more simplified. I remember saying to my current about his son as he was preparing for priesthood, I said, he's got about 4 languages to learn. He's got the modern one, he's got the purified one, he's got the ancient one, he's got the scriptural one. That's a lot of languages that aren't exactly the same. They're all related, but they're not exactly the same at all. Even in the years since I grew up. In the last 70 years, the language has changed so much that I say things and people look at me and laugh. Because anytime I try to speak Greek, everybody turns to English anyway. They tell me I have Americanisms that aren't really Greek, that the immigrants made up here. Here's the priest praying at the tomb. There are what they call the lamentation hymns at St. Mary's church. Everybody gets a copy of them in English and is invited to come up and stand around the tomb and sing the lamentation hymns. And they are things like, life itself was locked in a tomb. And the angels marveled at your humiliation, O Christ our God. That kind of thing, okay? And you saw what was in here, the icon of Christ. Now, a Catholic priest went with me one time to one of these ceremonies and said to me, "Is the Eucharist in there?" And I said, "That's very Western. The Eucharist would be in there, then we would think it's the real presence." They believe the Eucharist is the real presence, as we do. But they also think that the icon being in there that night is the real presence. All right? In fact, they don't even like the phrase real presence, because they say, we believe that it is the Lord, the risen Lord, and his sacrifice. But we feel like there's a lot of real presences that you make the impression that it's the only one. And we think there's a lot of them. And Vatican II actually said that there was a lot of them. All right, and this is the priest taking the whole thing to the altar. You see how it rests on the altar for all the days of Easter, the shroud. Okay, and the priest says Mass on it. And this would be in the sanctuary, behind the screen. Like I say, our Holy Week has priority. I want you to soak that up. If that's plenty, that's fine. Let at least a little of my presentation give you a broader perspective on ours. If some people would like to go, I want to call Father Anthony tomorrow and say, Anthony, I'd like to bring some people. I always do, but it's usually 2. I don't think I can take everybody by any means. And I would take people for one night, because it is, the cross ceremony is going to be 6:30 to 10 o'clock. Now, Byzantines cheat a little, so do Romans, but we do it different. We leave early. They arrive late. But don't leave. All right? So you go into church at 6:30, and it might not be super crowded, but it will be before the cross comes out. And then you stay for the whole thing. Okay? It's kind of the way they do. Because the services are more monastic than ours. So Good Friday would be 7 to 10. So it's an all-night event. I would suggest one at the most. The most strenuous is walking on Friday night, because you're going to Central Square to disrupt traffic on Mass Ave. And watch that witness. And then they go back to their own churches. And they have the custom, and the significance of this, when I first saw it, I said, my little 5-year-old godson, I take him to the unnailing service, and the tomb's put out, and the shroud is brought in and put in the tomb, and the priest starts to incense it, and he says, I need to go under it. And I said, I turned to his grandmother and I said, because she said it in Greek, I said, did he say I need to go under it? She said, you're getting better, Ed. I said, I don't understand. She said, it is our custom that everyone goes under the tomb, because we are saved under the death of Christ. And she said, so the little kids have somebody take them up there, and, you know, it's on a dais, as you could see. Can you go back one?
Yep.
It's on a platform like this. And the altar boys are usually underneath to make sure no kid gets lost. And so I took him out and put him down on the ground, and he scampers underneath. Comes out the other side with this big grin on his face, and comes over and takes my hand, and we go back to the seat. The adults, at the end of the procession, with the tune, they were lifted up at the front door of the church, and everybody goes through. And the Arabic custom is to touch it and bless yourself. I usually go in lay clothes, only so as not to cause a stir. The Arabic church would be much more used to us being there. The Greeks, you never know. All right, especially at St. Helens. And what I get is I get a real welcome, but what I get for a welcome is, oh, hi, Father Ed, hi, Father Ed, hi, Father, and it's during their Good Friday service. Mm-hmm. All right? And I get it in 2 languages. And it's sort of like, I feel like I'm disrupting everything. So I go, and then I get this. They wait. Now there's not a lot of people that I know at Helen and Constantine, the Greek church. Again, if Holy Week, our Holy Week is not that familiar to you, I would prefer you go there. I certainly don't want you to miss ours to go somewhere else. All right? But if you're interested and would like to see a different perspective on the same thing, come sign this and give me some way of getting a hold of you, email or phone, and we'll let you know what we're doing. Thank you.